Hello everybody, Yom Tov and welcome to Wednesday Folk Tales. Now today I hadn't received any requests or anything like that, so I went ahead and I found something for you that we haven't gone into before, and that's a little bit of Greek mythology. So today I have found what aren't mermaids but are called sirens. And I'm going to explain to you about what sirens are, where they originated, how they came into being, and different times they've popped up in Greek mythology. A lot of people tend to refer to them as either singing mermaids or women who sang and lured men to their deaths. So I'm just going to clear all that up for you and read to you what I found about mermaids. And there'll be a few, not exactly folk tales per se, but all the mythology that's wrapped up in what made a siren come into being, how they began, that sort of thing. So without any further ado, I'm just going to jump right in and read to you what it says on a site that I've called Mythology.net. Has all sorts of different things with regard to mythology on here. Really, really handy. So I'm going to jump into it and just explain to you that today it's all about learning about the sirens. And I hope you enjoy it. Now, if you sail too close to the island of Anthanessa, you will quickly find out what a siren is. These bird women can stop any ship that approaches their coast, bewitching the sailors with songs that make them forget everything else. The rocking ocean, the sails and tackle, the families waiting for them at home, and even life itself. If you search the internet for images of sirens, you'll probably get a flood of beautiful women with fishtails. You know what I was saying to you before about singing mermaids? Well, in many ways, the modern siren is a creepy version of the mermaid. Her long hair and scaly tail are darkly coloured. Her eyes and skin are ghostly pale, and she is set against a stormy background, a shipwreck waiting to happen. These images are a far cry from the original sirens. Instead of having fish tails, the first sirens had bird features, feathered wings, clawed feet, and sometimes sparrows' tails. They were not particularly beautiful, especially considered to the sea nymphs who frolicked in the waters below them. Now, sirens were a deadly bunch. And it says, according to Homer, who wrote the Odyssey, they bewitch any mortal who approaches them. They sit in a meadow. Men's corpses lie heaped up all around them, mouldering upon the bones as the skin decays. A search of the sea floor around their island would turn up entire ships, wrecked as they tried to get, to the sirens. Yet the sirens may not have initially been evil by nature. Few stories describe the temptresses physically attacking humans, which leaves the possibility that their songs weren't designed to kill. According to Nonnas, when a sailor hears the siren's perfidious song and bewitched by the melody, he is dragged to a self-chosen fate too soon. Falling into the net of melodious fate, he forgets to steer, quite happy. So if the sirens aren't cold-blooded killers, what motivates them to sing? Before the sirens took up their deadly singing career, they suffered several setbacks in life. They were cursed by both Demeter and the Muses and exiled to a small island where they were forced to live alone. It's possible that the sirens sang to avenge the wrongs against them. Abused by life, they decided to become monsters and destroy the lives of others. It's also possible that the sirens sang to express their grief. As they told Odysseus, "We know of all the sorrows in the wide land. We know all things that come to pass on the fruitful earth." This truth was something that they needed to share, even if it was more painful than mortals could bear to hear. Finally, the sirens may have been desperately lonely and used their songs to tempt men to join them on their island. Although the island was littered with human remains, there were no signs that the sirens had killed them. Instead, the men might have died of starvation after keeping the sirens company for several weeks. Now, the sirens were famous for their high, clear singing voices, which were so full of emotion they drove men insane. They also accompanied their voices with musical instruments, lyres, which was a kind of handheld harp. It's spelled Lyres. Flutes and pipes. They also had, or claimed to have, prophetic abilities, which lent depth to the lyrics of their songs. Now, there's legends about the sirens, and here's a couple of them. One of them is called Persephone's Handmaidens. Now, Persephone was known as the queen of hell. Hades took her down to hell to be his wife. And I think she could only return for several days of the year to be back with her human family before she had to return to hell to be with Hades. But it was Hades who kidnapped her in the first place, so, bad show. Before the sirens became the sirens, they were mortal girls who served the goddess Persephone. These lovely girls trailed behind Persephone when she visited her favourite meadows to pick flowers. They sang to her in sweet voices and played instruments to please her. But when Persephone was abducted by Hades, the loyal handmaidens volunteered to help look for her. Demeter gave them golden wings so they could fly over the earth searching for Persephone. But the search was in vain, since Persephone had been imprisoned in the underworld. Heartbroken over the loss of her daughter, Demeter lashed out against the innocent handmaidens, who had failed to bring good news back from their search. She cursed them, declaring that they would stay in their bird form until someone passed by their songs without stopping, at which point they would die. Then she banished them to an uninhabited island. That's a little bit unfair, isn't it? It's not their fault that they couldn't find Persephone. I mean, sorry, I said hell. I should have said the underworld, the land of the dead. So I got that bit wrong, so please forgive me. But that's not their fault. That they just couldn't find her. So it's a bit like a mother lashing out at anybody and everybody, isn't it, really? If something happens to her child. I'd probably do that. I'd probably lash out and kick at everybody if anything happened to one of my children and they didn't bring them home. But that's what happens when you go insane with worry, isn't it? I mean, I'm only talking about myself here. But anyway, continue. Now, here's another story about the competition with the Muses. After some time, Hera, who was obviously, the equivalent of Juno in, that's just my cat, by the way, climbing up the window. Hera was the mother of the Greek gods, the wife of Zeus. She was sort of the Roman equivalent of Juno. Well, after some time, Hera came to visit the Sirens on their lonely island. She had heard praise for their songs, full of beauty and anguish, and she wasn't disappointed by the live performance. So the goddess decided to give the girls a challenge. she invited them to enter a singing contest against the 9 Muses. After consulting together, the Sirens agreed to enter the contest. Of course, they'd heard the Muses' legendary music, but they also knew the power of their own songs. The competition produced some of the most haunting music that the Greeks had ever heard, with the Sirens pouring out all of their arresting heartache into their music. Still, the Muses, goddesses of music, where the Sirens were mere mortals, won the competition. To celebrate, they plucked out the Sirens' feathers and made crowns for themselves. The Sirens returned to the island in humiliation. That was a bit mean, plucking out their feathers. Are they supposed to fly without feathers? It's what mean things people do when they win competitions. I don't know. Takes all sorts though. And then we have the story of the voyage of Odysseus. During his 10-year voyage home, Odysseus passed by the island where the Sirens lived. Fortunately, he had been warned of their powers ahead of time, so as his ship drew near the rocky coast, he ordered all of his sailors to plug their ears with beeswax. Odysseus, however, was determined to hear the legendary music of the Sirens and live to tell the tale. With this goal in mind, he ordered his sailors to tie him to the mast of his ship. He then gave orders that he should not be untied, no matter how he begged or threatened them. The nervous sailors agreed to tie up their captain. No sooner were the ropes knotted than Odysseus heard voices, unimaginably high and clear, calling to him. "Come hither, renowned Odysseus. Hither, you pride and glory of all Achaea. Pause with your ship. Listen to our song." Odysseus was understandably flattered, and he began to wish to meet the beautiful women who sang so sweetly to him. After a few more lines of the siren music, Odysseus was in a frenzy to be released. He raved at his sailors, who fortunately could not hear him since their ears were full of beeswax, and strained at his ropes until they cut into his skin. But the ship drifted on, and in an hour the island was behind them and the spell subsided. After Odysseus passed the island, the Sirens hurled themselves into the sea and died, making him the last person to hear their bewitching music. Wow, didn't expect that. Now, in Greek culture, it says this about the Sirens. The Sirens appear in Greek's oldest works of literature: Homer, Virgil, Pliny the Elder, Ovid, Seneca, and Hesiod. All describe these bewitching singers. By the end of the Greek period, Grecian scholars had concluded that the women were no more than fable. Yet their legend lived on for centuries after the Greek civilization crumbled away. Writers as far back as William Shakespeare began to merge sirens with mermaids, combining the sweet, vibrant appearance of the fish maidens with the dreamy voice of the sirens. Over time, the link between these two creatures has grown tighter. Today, it's hard to find a feathered siren in popular culture. And although the original sirens have gone out of fashion, siren-mermaid hybrids are still incredibly popular. They can be found in all sorts of works of fantasy, from fairy tales written by Hans Christian Andersen, The Little Mermaid, and C.S. Lewis, to blockbuster movies like Harry Potter and the Pirates of the Caribbean. So there you have, today, when I've brought you the history of the Sirens. And, we all know about mermaids. The basic thing about mermaids is, or so we're told, that they have beautiful singing voices. but the tails of fish. But if they want to live on the land, they have to give up their voices and also give up their tails of fish because they get legs. So they can't have their cake and eat it too. They can't have a beautiful singing voice and speaking voice and have legs. You can either have one or the other. And if anybody remembers Stingray from the 1960s by Jerry Anderson, you remember that, the marionettes? And in Stingray, they had a character called Marina, and she was a mermaid who had given up her legs. Well, she'd given up her fish tail so she could have legs because she was in love with Troy Tempest. Do you remember that? But of course, she was dumb. She couldn't speak because she had legs. She was the daughter of King Poseidon. So, anyway, that's a little bit of nostalgia for anybody who remembers the likes of Thunderbirds and Stingray and Joe 90 and, you know, shows like that. You know, like Captain Scarlet and things. You know, it's something that we should talk about sometime. TV shows from our childhood and the sort of things that we used to watch when we were kids. Because I certainly watched all the Jerry Anderson stuff. I absolutely loved it. You know, Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons, Joe 90, the little kid who was about like 11 years old or something, but he went into a machine that his dad had created, which gave him the brain power of an adult, and the personality of an adult to boot. And then of course there was Thunderbirds and the Tracy family living on Tracy Island. And there was Stingray with Troy Tempest and Commander Shaw's daughter, what was her name? Oh God, it's gonna come to me. It was just there before. Atlanta, that was her name. And Troy Tempest's sidekick was called Bones because he had the headphones on, remember? And then there was the one I always used to call the fish guy, the one who was always trying to capture them and get them into trouble. But I can never remember his name. He had big boggly eyes. Does anybody remember him? Anyway, excuse me, I must have a drink. So, anyway, I just wanted to have a quick chat with you about the video that I put out yesterday. I wanted to thank everybody for being so kind and leaving such wonderful comments. There's still a few that I need to answer. I've already answered you, but I need to answer you again because you've left further comments from before. But I must admit, I'm blown away because I honestly believed that I was going to be read the Riot Act, because there are an awful lot of people who love Harry and Meghan. You know, we've got to keep it real here. There are not as many as there were, I have to say, not as many as there were, which is just an indication of how badly things have been going for them recently. But it's more likely the younger members of society who think Harry and Meghan are all that's marvellous. It's the next generation up who are sort of getting a grip to them and realising that there's a lot more to this than meets the eye. And I just wanted to thank everybody for their support of what I said yesterday. I don't feel like so much of a lone wolf calling in the wilderness anymore. I just want to say that, I had one lady say that because of Meghan, it puts all Americans in a bad light. No, it certainly doesn't. I think Americans are great. I don't have a beef with any of them. Well, that's not strictly true. I could give Meghan a right old telling off. I'm not going to lie to you. I could do. If I was given the opportunity, I would. If I thought she would listen. But I think she's been too much of a diva. No, Americans can stand with their heads held high and stand proud and tall as far as I'm concerned. They've done nothing wrong. They are not responsible for her behaviour. She's responsible for her own behaviour, as is Harry. As far as I'm concerned, they're as bad as each other. The other thing that I was going to say is that I think the British people are more determined than ever that they are not going to pay for their security, and that they either pay for them themselves, or it comes out of the Queen's pocket, or the pocket of the Prince of Wales and the Duchy of Lancaster. I don't see why we should have to fork out for their security. And somebody asked me, why is it so much for those three? It's because of them living outside of the country and the SAS trained officers who have to go backwards and forwards from the UK over to Canada, over to America and back again. And then whenever abouts in America, they decide to bounce around. Because most of these men have homes and families. And they're going to be paid overtime for working weekends and things like that. And that's why it's so expensive. It doesn't cost as much to keep the royal family here. It really doesn't. And all this kidnapping threat and what have you, they talk about it being a real threat. Princess Anne has children and grandchildren of her own. They can skip about the country as freely as they like. It's not long since Princess Anne's daughter took the kids down to Australia with her. And they jump in and out around the country like there's no tomorrow. William and Catherine, they take George and Charlotte and Louis all over the place with them. You never hear them talk about threats and all this sort of nonsense. You just don't hear about it. It brings me back to this thing about self-entitlement. And I think they believe they are more important than they actually are. And nobody is more important than the Queen. Nobody. Certainly not in the UK, as far as the royal family is concerned. There is nobody more important than the Queen. No one. And, love the royals or hate them, they are a great source for tourism in this country. We get literally hundreds of thousands of people coming to the UK every year. A lot of them to visit Buckingham Palace in the summer weeks when it's open. A lot of them still like to go and visit, Diana's country home. There's so much of historical interest to see in the UK that people outside of the UK want to come and see. So when it comes to the royal family and value for money, yeah, I think we get good value for money out of our royal family. I mean, the Queen, at one time the Duke of Edinburgh, but not anymore. Now he's retired. But you're talking about last year, Princess Anne did 500 and odd engagements. Now there's only 365 days in a year. I know we've got a day extra this year, but there's only 365 days in a year. And yet she did over 500 engagements last year. That's just one woman. Charles and Camilla did about 300 and odd between them. Sophie, Wessex and Edward, they did about 300 and odd between them. William and Catherine were doing between 300 and 400 between them. So, everybody does their bit. Even the Queen is now slowing down and isn't doing as many engagements. Because, let's face it, the woman's in her 90s. But she still gets round the ones she feels are the most important. And, everything that makes the royal family special is all wrapped up in history. We've got over 1,000 years of history when it comes to the monarchy. And we've got, in Europe, we've got about the longest lasting ruling families going now. Some have been, have had members who've had to abdicate, so the ruling family's still there, it's just not in any power. Our Queen doesn't really have any political power. Her role is more or less ceremonial, and it's constitutional. She has the right to warn, she's got the right to advise, she has the right to be informed. Ministers will go to her and ask her to dissolve Parliament, to recall Parliament, that sort of thing. She's very much a figurehead, but she's an important figurehead. And it's a lot less bother and a lot more attractive having a queen and all the ceremonial than it would be to have boring men in suits day in, day out. I would much rather have a royal family than a republic any day, because it's just more glamorous, and there's more to see, and there's more ceremonial, and of course I love that sort of stuff. And an awful lot of people feel the same way as I do. So I hope that answers some questions anyway, although I'm still going to be answering questions in the comments. But I just hope that helps a little, sorry. But no, the one thing that I did want to mention, when I told you yesterday about Princess Anne travelling on the London Underground, called the Tube, with a lady in waiting with her, going to an engagement. When Harry went to Edinburgh this week to talk about this thing called travel light, where we all are much more careful about our carbon footprint, he actually hired out a whole first-class carriage just to himself and his team, so they could travel back down to London. Now, if his aunt can sit side by side with the likes of people like me, why can't he sit beside people like me? Or are we not good enough for him? Because I'd like that answer. Why is he so special and so entitled? And we're coming back again to this thing about being entitled. what makes him so special that he's got to have a whole train carriage to himself, first class? And did he pay for it? We don't know. I don't know. I don't know who paid for his travel. But his aunt can sit on public transport and go to an engagement. And, get off the tube at the station and then walk round to where her engagement is happening. Not turning up in a car or in a Rolls Royce or anything like that. She got on public transport and walked around the corner. That to me is a real royal, leading by example. And that's why I keep telling you, she would have made a fantastic queen. It's just a pity that wet Charles is in her way. And that horse he's married to. No, I'm not fond of Charles and Camilla at all. And one day I will sit and talk to you about my perspective on the Charles, Diana and the Camilla story. When Diana said there were 3 of us in the marriage, so it was a bit crowded. I'll give you my perspective on that, which won't really err that far away from what Diana said herself. But I'm going to go on what I saw in the papers, photographs, things like that. Which by the time I've told you what I saw and how I saw it and how I perceived it back then you'll understand where I'm coming from. I might do that next week. We'll have to see what Megxit comes up with in the meantime, because they're putting in an appearance. Oh, just a quick one. Before I go, I've been asked, will the marriage last? Now, you guys already know, who come here regularly, that I said before that I saw maybe another couple of years. I'm going to put my neck on the line and say in public that I truly believe their marriage will be done and dusted by 2025. Whether there's another child involved, I don't know. Whether they'll have a second child, I don't know. If they do, it'll be for money. For me gain. Absolutely. I'm sick of the pair of them. I think Harry will come home humiliated. I don't think this traipsing around America is in Harry's taste. It's just not. So we'll have to see, won't we? But that's my take on it. I think that Meghan will claim it's not working, and I'm not quite sure how it's going to all work out, but I reckon that she will be determined to keep Archie, because the longer she keeps Archie, it means more money out of the royal family, and it establishes her status, because I can't see her wanting to give up the Duchess of Sussex thing. But if she does divorce Harry, then we will be asking for her to be stripped of the HRH, definitely. If she's not going to be a working member of the royal family and not married to a member of the royal family, then she does not deserve to keep the HRH. Just the same as Sarah Ferguson. And unfortunately, like Diana, she was allowed to be called Diana, Princess of Wales. But unfortunately, she lost our HRH status. She lost our royal protection. And sadly, we know the rest, don't we? You know. I mean, I don't wish anybody dead, but goodness me, I don't think we would have missed Fergie that much, do you? Not as much as we missed Diana. But, oh, sorry, all these things happen for a reason, guys, don't they? Right, well, I better go, because I'm yacked on again far too long. When do I not stop yakking? I get worse. Anyway, thank you again for listening to what I've told you today about the Sirens. And I hope it's been entertaining, and I hope it's been educational, and I hope you've enjoyed it, and it's told you some things that you didn't know, because it told me some things I didn't know, or at least I've forgotten them. I used to read an awful lot of Greek mythology, Roman mythology when I was younger. So I've enjoyed it. Anyway, I hope you have. I've got episode 8 for Friday night for the Paranormal Crew. So this one's more action-packed. Less sex, more action, which is better for me. It's not that I'm a prude or anything, but I just find it a bit cringy reading it out loud. Do you know what I mean? It's excellent writing and fantastic imagery, I will say that. I mean, she's a very good writer, Cithero. Excellent writer. But too graphic for some of our Haveners. So that's why I had to tone it down. But much more action-packed episode this week with a real cliffhanger that you will never guess in a million years. So I hope you look forward to that, because I'm looking forward to reading it to you. And I'll tell you if there's any news on the strike over at the subreddit. See what happens there, shall we? Anyway, I love you guys. Thanks again for being here with me. I really do appreciate it. And I will see the Paranormal Crew on Friday for your spooky sessions. And please keep your fingers crossed for me that I'm here for you next Monday. Because I don't like having, I mean, it doesn't really do me a great deal of good doing a video and then a video the next day. Because I do find it hard going with me being an old bag and what have you. It's, you know, it gets hard. So if you could just send me some good vibes to keep me going for Monday, I'd really appreciate it. I really would. So anyway, take care, guys. Love you. And see you soon. Bye for now.